Councillor Iannicca, he made a very passionate plea, basically, to have you become the transportation czar for the GTA.
Councillor Iannicca.
My apologies, Madam Mayor, because I don't want to mute my earlier message, but something else was in the paper this morning speaking to the same issue. And dare I say, Madam Mayor, everybody knows the problem with our transit system here is there's too many silos. And yet we have the big move, we have the smart commute, we have metro links, we have all these jurisdictions. And as I said before, once I was told from one of the people in Paris that you don't amount to 3 arrondissements in Paris, you have 8 agencies. I'd have one office running all of your transportation system in the GTA. And you've got 8, 12 bureaux. And Madam Mayor, we both go back to the days when the Howard Moscows of the world said, oh, you stop here on Dundas because now you're crossing an imaginary line and you've got to get off a bus and get on like sheer stupidity. And that's what was built because everybody was protecting their pipelines. My point, Madam Mayor, the paper this morning said, one of the 3 papers said, the Premier mentioned that we really do need a czar for transportation in the downtown core because the thinking engineering part of it is relatively simple. Everybody knows what we need to do. It's not complicated. It's getting that one person in the room that can make everybody agree that this is the path we must take. And Madam Mayor, I think you've got some time on your hands after October of this year, and I hope the Premier's looking around and thinking who can get everybody in a room to make it happen, and she doesn't have to look any further than you. So I didn't want to muddle my first message with that, but we need a czar for transportation, the GTA, get rid of all these silos and say, let common sense prevail. Everybody knows Islington Kipling should be the subway to Highway 5 and 10 to link up with my LRT. It's where all the growth is. I won't bore you all to death again. Anybody looking at it dispassionately and logically knows what the plan is. Let's fund the plan and implement it. And Madam Mayor, after the rose petals, you'd make a great GTA czar for transportation.
Councillor Iannicca, he made a very passionate plea, basically, to have you become transportation czar for the GTA, you know, after you step down as mayor. I know what you've been pushing for. I know how successful you've been in terms of helping, you know, the Premier out and whatnot. What are your thoughts about just Councillor Iannicca's idea?
Well, it's up to the province, but I can assure you that even though I won't be mayor as of November the 30th, I'm going to certainly push for the changes that need to be made. I think what needs to happen, which I find I'm confused about, is so many ideas are out there that really somebody's going to have to sit down or the Metrolinx some group is going to have to sit down and figure out what are the priorities in order to determine with the lack of money to fund any of them, we better decide what priorities there are and get on with it. I'm concerned about the lack of activity. And yes, some projects are moving, and then there's confusion over the Scarborough line. I mean, everybody's getting into the act, but I sense from my assessment of it that there's lack of decision-making and coordination and decision-making. Saying, this is what has to be done, let's get on with it. And determine where the revenue is coming from to fund it. Right now, there's just all kinds of ideas out there.
Right.
Everybody's coming up with a new plan.
Right.
Oh, we're going to go over there now.
LRT to fulfill your mandate to me that this density has to take place. We're not arguing. We're saying we realize it has to be done.
Yeah.
But you have to give us the infrastructure.
In terms of the moving parts,
Yes.
you know, you've got what Mississauga wants, that's part of the big move.
Yes.
The LRT is a focus.
Yes.
Peel, it's, you know, spreads out BRT
Yes.
projects, whatnot. There's been bus rapid transit in Brampton. You've got, you know, York with its transit expansion. Yes. You've got what Durham's looking for.
Yes.
Toronto, obviously, with all
Yes.
of it. You, as the mayor said, you need someone to take control
Yes.
of this process.
Yes.
You need someone, you know, Metrolinx sort of has that role,
Yes.
but I think she's talking about, you know, as you said, like a czar who sits sort
Absolutely.
of above all of that.
Sam, to that very, very point, we've studied. Now we have to coordinate, we have to make a decision, and we have to fund it. The great frustration for my constituency and for downtown Mississauga is every study ever done has said the same thing. Number one priority in the GTA, the LRT along Highway 10. Number 2, extending the Kipling subway to Highway 5 and 10. It's where most of the growth is growing, and it's where an incredible revitalization will take place because of the infrastructure. We're getting fed up of Metrolinx and the big move all coming to the same conclusion. Great, now let's just implement it. Nobody is pulling the trigger on implementing it and funding it. We don't need more studies. We need somebody to take charge and say, let's just do it.
And considering there has to be so much municipal buy-in. For
Yes.
example, a lot of the funding tools proposed by Metrolinx, you would need the municipalities to
Yes.
sort of agree to it. It's
Yes.
going to impact them.
And-
Is Hazel the perfect person
Sam,
then?
and this is the other frustrating part of it.
But speak to Hazel.
Okay, and with regards to Hazel and all of our council, the LRT is already being designed. We've already approved it. We voted on
Yeah.
it. We all have buy-in. So Hazel can go to the table and say, you're all bickering about above ground, underground, who's going to fund, et cetera, et cetera. We're ready to go. We're here with open arms. We've done our studies. We've sold it to the communities. The planning studies have been done to bring the density in. Let's move ahead with what makes sense. Hazel understands it because she's done it at the ground level and she sees the bigger picture.
And why would she be perfect in the sense of bringing all the regions together, all of the mayors, working with Queen's Park? Why would she be an ideal candidate to be that czar?
A couple of things. I think she has the respect of the Premier. Number 2, her years of experience and her wisdom just in general gives her great deference when she sits around the table. And number 3, she has the reputation of being no nonsense. Not time to bicker and discuss anymore, time to implement and fund. So I think she would crack the whip in that room and say, let's get to it. It's a crime that we haven't extended the major infrastructure of the GTA in decades when other cities get ahead of us. So it's time to implement. And I think Hazel can bring all the mind. Nobody else has been able to succeed, and if anybody's got a better idea, I'm willing to listen to it. But I think Hazel's perfectly situated, with the respect that she has in the Premier's office, to fulfill this enormous duty on behalf of the GTA.
And what about in terms of the 905 versus the 416? Would she be able to sit down with Toronto, the mayor of Toronto, councillors in Toronto, and represent their needs, but at the same time make sure that the 905, the regions, get what they deserve?
A great point, because, and this gets lost on a lot of the politicians bickering, this is not mutually exclusive. This is the rising tide lifting all boats. So let's come to a conclusion on what you're doing in Scarborough. Let's figure out what the relief line is for Toronto. We're bickering so much that nobody's getting anything done. I think Hazel has the ability to say, these are the 3 priorities, the data tells us that, let's get to it. Those of you that were concerned you weren't in phase 1, in 3 to 5 years there'll be a phase 2, but let's get to it, because under the model we followed for 30 years, nothing's been done, and the 2 million people are coming, and we have to put in a transportation plan, or we won't be able to move in this city anymore.
Yeah, okay. And just directly, though, address that issue about the possible concern that, could someone work both with with Toronto, and not alienate Toronto and thinking, oh, Hazel's just going to be advocating for the 905 at the 416's expense.
And as I said, I think the reason I think Hazel can bridge the 905-416 gap is she is respected, but more importantly, she is pragmatic and she understands the bigger picture. Finally, I think timing is everything. Regardless of what your interests are and who the people and the personalities involved may be, Toronto must know, Vaughan must know, Oakville must know, Oshawa must. It's time to get to it. So the decision being made is more important than the decision almost, because if you don't get it in phase 1, we'll get you in phase 2. But for 30 years, we've been comatose on the transportation file, and development has caught up to us. And as I said, we're welcoming 2.4 million people in the next 20 to 30 years. We'd better get on with it, or we'd better freeze development.
I'm going to switch to 2 different issues.